this is Kate from Generate Magic. I just got back from my walk and I felt inspired to make a follow-up to my last video. So in my last video, I was talking about how there's not anything that you have to do. And I wanted to make a key distinction that there's a big difference between having a positive expectation versus doing something out of desperation. So positive expectation is doing a course or doing some sort of tactic or an exercise plan with the expectation that it is going to positively transform your life in some way. Or, not necessarily everything has to transform our lives, right? But at least kind of going with the expectation that this is going to be an enjoyable experience or a good learning experience, because sometimes it's fun learning something new just for the sake of learning, and versus doing something out of desperation. And so going back to the example of marketing, right? A lot of times people will say, if you're not doing this particular thing, or if you are doing this particular thing, then you're never going to succeed in your niche or in your business. And likewise, we see this in the manifestation community a lot too, right? Somebody will say, if you don't do this technique, or if you are doing this, then you'll never get your manifestation. And so first of all, I think these types of tactics, there's almost always like an agenda behind them, right? Anytime people are using any sort of fear and tactic, it's usually coming from out of their own desperation. And so I know from my own experience, when I feel compelled to do whatever it is that they're telling me to do, then it's coming from a place of desperation within myself, right? It's coming from this it starts from like a fear of missing out, right? Well, I guess it starts kind of with a curiosity. So I see the headline and then I'm kind of like drawn in. I'm like, well, what can it possibly be what possible missing ingredient could it be that if I learn this key ingredient, my life would drastically be transformed, right? So curiosity is usually kind of how they hook you in. And then it's kind of like a fear of missing out, right? You're like, well, if I don't learn this technique, or if I don't take this course, then I'm never going to reach my goal. And so, so I think the fear of missing out, that's kind of becomes tinged with desperation, right? And so my dad, he's a bit of a practical joker, and so he always likes to tell these really outrageous stories. And especially growing up, I was very gullible, and so I would always ask my dad when he would tell one of these stories. I would always say, really? And my mom would always say, well, if you have to ask. and so I think in this case, it's the same way, right? If you have to ask. So in other words, if you kind of ask yourself going in, like, am I just doing this out of desperation? Or am I just doing this out of fear of missing out, or fear that if I somehow don't learn this technique, then I'm going to be doomed to failure for the rest of my life? And so if I have to ask myself that, then the answer is most likely no. And so that's a good litmus test that you can do when you're presented with a piece of information, or some sort of course or video, right? And also, just kind of knowing the difference between positive expectation versus desperation. So with that, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.